Ida Early Comes Over the Mountain by Robert Birch. Schoolyard. The twins refused to go to school. The first day of the term they made such a fuss that Ida let them stay home. "But you must go tomorrow," she said, "or we'll all be in trouble with your pa." The next morning Clay and Dewey dressed for school, ate their breakfast, and hid in the loft of the barn till the bus went past. The next day they went to the bus stop, but ran into the woods when the bus came along, and no one could catch them. Finally they agreed to go to school if Ida would go with them. "Why?" she asked. "To keep the teacher from whipping us," said Dewey. "That teacher's not going to whip you. You've been listening to too many tales Randall and J.C. have been telling you." "We'll go if you go," said Clay. "No," said Ida. "Why should I go?" "Why should we go?" asked Clay. "'Cause I want you to," said Ida. "We want you to go," insisted Clay. "Oh, all right. Tomorrow I'll go with you, and I'll stay till recess." "What's recess?" asked Dewey. "That's when you play and have a good time. You won't mind doing that without me. But I'll go," she promised, "and I'll stay with you till then. Is that a bargain?" Clay and Dewey looked at each other. Finally Clay nodded, and Dewey said, "I guess so." "Okay, shake hands on it," said Ida. "No, no, not with each other, with me." She clutched their hands together in hers and pumped them up and down. "Good," she said, letting their hands go. "We've struck us a bargain, and there's no backing out. Do you understand?" "We won't back out," promised Clay. "We'll go." In the morning the twins did not try to get out of their agreement. Breakfast was earlier than usual so that they and Ida would have plenty of time to walk to school. Ida had doubted the driver would let her ride the bus with them, so the twins had agreed to walk with her. In the afternoon Ellen and Randall were there to see that they returned home safely. Grammar School, at one end of the long building, was separated from the high school by a big auditorium. Because high school students were allowed to use the gymnasium and the ball field, most of the schoolyard was considered a playground for the grammar school. At recess, children in the primary grades played in back of the building. The ones in the middle grades kept to the side of it, and the older boys and girls stayed in front. Randall and his pals liked to gather at the end of the schoolyard. There was a high bank overlooking the road, and they could watch any cars that went past. When there were no cars to watch, they chatted with, and sometimes teased, the girls who gathered at the big tree nearby. Ellen and her friends were usually near the tree, although this morning they had stopped somewhere else. Joe Blakely said, "I hate school." "Just 'cause you didn't know the answer a while ago?" said Dan Rogers. Mrs. Long had caught Joe staring out the window instead of paying attention during math. "Know the answer?" said Randall. "Joe didn't even know the question." He and Dan laughed. "That's okay, Joe," said Dan. "I knew the answer, but I hate school too." "Yeah, me too," said Randall, but he didn't mean it. It was easier to pretend that he disliked it than to try to explain his real feelings. In truth, he enjoyed school and was glad it had started back. After being home all summer, seldom seeing anyone outside the family, it was fun to be part of a bigger world. Lessons could be interesting. Some he enjoyed more than others, but what he liked best was being with friends. While he stood near the bank, he saw Ida coming around the corner of the building. Even though he'd known she was bringing the twins to school today, it seemed strange to see her here. She belonged in a different part of his life. It was as if she were in the wrong place now. Home, as he stood talking with Joe and Dan, seemed a long way off. Randall half expected Clay and Dewey to come running after Ida, in spite of their promise to stay in school. He was relieved when she reached the end of the walkway and the twins had not yet appeared. Joe, seeing Ida on the road, asked, "Who's that?" "You mean, what's that?" asked Dan. The question shocked Randall. Then he realized that Dan may never have seen a woman who was taller than most men. Too, it wasn't just her height that was noticeable to anyone who'd never seen Ida. It was a lot of things, including her overalls and clodhopper shoes and hair that looked like a frazzled hearth broom. Ida looked up and saw the boys looking at her. "Howdy do," she called cheerily, waving at them with both hands. Randall felt himself blush. He put up his hand feebly and waved back as Dan called, "Howdy do to you. Are you a new student?" "Could be," answered Ida, "or I could be a new teacher." A group of girls nearby giggled, and another group, including Daisy Coker and Faye Edison, called the Loudmouths by their classmates in the 6th grade, walked over to the edge of the bank just as Dan asked, "What do you teach?" Didn't say I taught anything, said Ida. I said I could. What could you teach? He yelled back. More students, including Ellen and some of her friends, came out to the bank. Most anything, answered Ida, stopping on the roadside and grinning up at the students who were looking down at her. Daisy Coker yelled across to Dan, She could teach home economics. Can't you tell from those overalls that she knows all about styles? A lot of the boys and girls laughed. Ida did not look as if she thought it had been especially funny, but she kept grinning. Well, thank you, she said. I'm glad you approve of my outfit, but next time I'll try to wear something else if that would be better. Wear a clown suit, shouted Faye Edison. Ida laughed. Now that's an idea. I've never thought of wearing a clown suit. Randall wished the bell would ring for recess to end. He could tell that Ida was more hurt than she let on. You don't need a clown suit, said Daisy. Yeah, added Faye, you look funny enough as it is. Their friends laughed loudly. Ida's grin disappeared, and she looked at Randall, but not say anything to him. And she looked over at Ellen. Randall knew he should say something, tell their classmates that the joke had gone far enough and to leave Ida alone, but he couldn't speak. Daisy called to Ida, You act funny, too. Ida turned and started away. Daisy and Faye called after her, Clown! Clown! More boys and girls joined in. Clown! Clown! They shouted. Dan reached down and picked up a pebble. He drew back his arm to throw it, and Ellen said, Don't! Oh, it won't hurt, said Dan. It'll just scare her. I want to see her jump. He took aim again. Randall grabbed Dan's arm and made him drop the stone, but he knew it was too late for Ida to know that anyone on the bank had acted at all like a friend. After school. Randall went by the first grade, but Clay and Dewey were not there. They left with the other children, said Mrs. Putney. Weren't they to catch the bus? No, ma'am, we're walking home today, and they were to wait here. You'd better run check the buses, said Mrs. Putney, and Randall hurried away. Just as he rounded a corner of the building, Clay and Dewey called to him from behind a clump of shrubbery. Come help us, called Dewey, and Randall ran to them. He was afraid they were in trouble. Reckon where they keep the shovel around here? Asked Clay. Pointing to the small hole in the ground, he said, A chipmunk ran in this hole, and if we can find a shovel, we'll dig it out. Oh, come on, said Randall disgustedly. And why didn't you wait in the room the way you were supposed to? We just came outside a little way, said Dewey, and then we saw the chipmunk. Well, that chipmunk's gone. No, it ran in this hole, insisted Clay. Yeah, but that hole probably goes to a tunnel that connects with another one till it comes out somewhere else. Where? Anywhere, said Randall. Pointing toward a tree across the playground, he said, Over there, maybe. Let's go look, said Dewey, but Randall grabbed each of the twins by a hand and led them away. Ellen's waiting for us at the drugstore. The drugstore, said Clay. Oh, boy, can we buy ice cream? Maybe, said Randall, if there's any money left. He was thinking about the Monopoly set. They'd heard that the drugstore had a new shipment of games. At the store, Mrs. Dawson, the druggist's wife, said, We're sold out of Monopoly. Leading them to a counter, she said, But look around. You may see something you like better. She held up a small box. Here are some rook cards. Have you ever played rook? No, ma'am, said Randall. It's fun, said Mrs. Dawson. So does Old Maid. She held up another box. We have Old Maid cards, said Ellen. How about a Parcheesi set, said Mrs. Dawson, and when they turned it down, she urged other games on them. Randall was glad when more customers came into the store, and she left to wait on them. The twins were not tall enough to see onto the counter, and they went back to the front of the store to study the different kinds of candy. The counter there had glass across the front that went almost to the floor. Ellen and Randall continued to look at the assortment of games till Randall said, Why don't we buy Ida Early a present? I was thinking that same thing, said Ellen. Neither of them had spoken of the incident in the schoolyard. We let her down, said Randall. Maybe. I haven't been able to think of anything else all day. What we did was cowardly. Oh, I don't know, said Ellen. Randall guessed that she did know, but wasn't ready to admit it. We should have said something, he told her. I don't know if we could have stopped them. But we didn't even try, insisted Randall. Of course she could have stopped them by walking on. He sounded as if he were angry at Ida, but he knew he was angry with himself. Maybe it's not her nature to walk on whenever anybody wants to talk, said Ellen. Maybe she's lonely down deep. What do you think? I think we should buy her a box of candy. She'd like it. No, said Ellen, we'd wind up eating most of it. What about perfume? You'd wind up using most of it. When Randall had given up on finding a gift for Ida, Ellen asked, What about a checkerboard? Do you suppose she knows how to play checkers? Well, I imagine she was once upon a time the champion checker player of the whole wide world. He was a bit ashamed of himself for doing an imitation of Ida, but Ellen laughed, and at least they had agreed on what to buy. After the board and the checkers had been purchased, there was enough money left for an ice cream cone for everyone. Part way home, Randall noticed that Dewey had not finished his. It was dripping onto the road. "Eat your ice cream," he said. "I'm saving a little for Ida." "It'll melt," said Randall, and Dewey reluctantly licked the last of the cream. "I'll save the cone part for her," he said. Randall wondered what Ida would say when they got home. Would she act as if nothing had happened in the schoolyard, or would she be mad with him and Ellen for not even admitting that they knew her? He kept thinking of the hurt look on her face. He had glimpsed it at other times, at the carnival when the man Noon had made such ugly remarks, and once or twice when his aunts had made snide comments. But on those occasions the hurt expression was fleeting. In the schoolyard it had lasted. If only Dan Rogers hadn't started yelling at Ida, and if Daisy Coker and Faye Edison hadn't come along and made things worse. But Randall knew that he was the one who'd failed Ida. Ellen had been there later, but he'd been in on the incident from the beginning. If he'd said something like, "Hey, Dan, that's Ida Early you're talking to. She's our friend," or maybe just introduced them to each other, everything would have been different. He couldn't erase the picture in his mind of Ida's expression as she left the schoolyard. It haunted him. He thought of nothing else until they were home. Dewey ran into the house first. "Ida," he called. "Ida, we're back." "We stayed in school the way we promised," called Clay, but there was no answer. "She must be outside," said Dewey, going into the back porch and calling, "Ida, where are you, Ida?" Clay went onto the porch too, and together they called for Ida as loudly as they could. But there was no answer.